Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, no matter where you are in the world and where you're listening to this, welcome along to the All Blacks podcast, proudly brought to you by Vodafone. Myself, Reeve, at the helm today. Back into the driver's seat, Rob Roundy Dunne. How are?
Yeah, good, mate. Good to be back in the studio. It's a little bit nervous. It's been a while, but hopefully we'll be able to get back into it.
We're going to break you in nice and easily. A man that absolutely needs no introduction, but that's what we do on the show. He is the CEO of New Zealand Rugby. Welcome to the All Blacks podcast, Mr. Mark Robinson. How are you?
G'day, guys. I'm good. Yeah, great to be here too.
Hey,
really impressive setup here.
Thank you very much for giving up your time, because I know that you are an incredibly busy man, and what a year. I think the last time I saw you was at the Sevens in Hamilton, and she was sunshine and lollipops, and by golly, by gosh, didn't things turn quickly?
Man, that seems a long time ago now. I do vaguely remember that. You're right. I remember you swanning around and enjoying the festivities there. But no, it was a very sort of simple, straightforward sort of time of the year back then, and it seems, like I said, a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, I think I was 4 to 5 weeks into the role when COVID hit, of which 2.5 to 3 weeks I'd spent overseas with some World Rugby and other sort of work I needed to get into in Europe and the UK, and going up to see Adidas in Germany, which was great. And as it turned out, COVID sort of followed me around Europe. Every place I went to and then subsequently travelled on to, the cases just kept spiking in behind me. So,
is he patient zero, are you?
Super.
Bring it in.
Yeah, safe guys. So yeah, and then landed, and then not long after that we were into lockdown and dealing with all the different stuff that has been well documented over the last sort of 7 or 8 months.
I guess for a lot of the people that are listening that know your backstory, it's an impressive one. For those that don't know, you really have shown how you can transition through a love of the game, right the way through the players into the top level of footy that we have on offer here in New Zealand and in the world, and then having the top job in what we would say would be World Rugby. Take us back to the Naki. Where did the passion? I mean, obviously a very proud. I mean, I grew up in Rahuru, not far from around the corner from where you were. A very proud rugby region. Drummed into your early doors. Were you a part of that? And I remember it as a kid, and we're about the same age, so I could probably throw you in the mix here. I think it might have been Eater sponsored it, and you used to get a little tag, and you used to get a first aid kit, and you get to sew it on your jersey. Were you of that era of rugby, or was it you still buying your own jerseys?
Yeah, mate. You sound like you had a much more
proud rugby
privileged upbringing than I did in terms of rugby sponsorships, mate. But I guess my first memories are typical of what most kids living up in the country were like, So bare feet, frosty grounds, a lot of mud. Just lived under the mountain in Kauponga in South Taranaki, and so a lot of trips home after a game in the boot of a car or in the back seat and making sure blankets and all sorts of other things didn't dirty the family wagon and all that sort of good stuff. Yeah, down to back home briefly for lunch, and then back down to the local park to watch senior club game, and then run around all night after that with a can of drink and a Moro or a packet of chips or something, and that was sad days, So yeah, that was drummed into me at a young age, and I loved it. The games of touch and rugby that went alongside all that sort of stuff on a Saturday, and followed the game religiously as I grew up. Loved playing it. I've got a younger brother who many brutal sort of wars out on the back.
He said that you, mate, it was 1-on-1, and then you get a mate over, and as the older brother, it was 2-on-1, 2 older guys. You wouldn't give him any mercy at all. You just go 2 big units on the little fella.
Oh, he had to learn. So no, and we had a lot of farms were a lot smaller back in Taranaki in those days. So I think in the radius where we lived, now there's not as many young people on the same areas of land, whereas back then you could gather up sort of 10, 15 guys pretty quickly and go to work. It was great fun.
And talking about that, obviously jumping forward slightly more, when you see the state of regional rugby these days, like you said, like on our road, we had, I think, 15 farms on one side and about 12 on the other, which meant that there was, effectively 20-odd families that were there with 20-odd sets of kids that frequented the primary schools. And now those bigger family blocks in the rural sector, can you see from your position now rugby stagnating, possibly growing, or in a decline, and because of that reason alone? Without the community, you don't have the kids that turn up in the mornings to play footy, that then go and watch the old boys or the older brothers playing that club rugby in the afternoon, and then spill into the regions after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly different. I think we have to acknowledge that. And smaller communities where I grew up, rugby's still a big part of what makes a place tick. You know, a rugby club is still very central to people coming together, very central to camaraderie, people looking after each other, you know, people supporting each other in times of difficulty and all that sort of good stuff. But there's no doubt that, you know, those regions have less people in them now. And I guess part of what rugby's going through as we transition through COVID is to try and understand how we move and adapt to those new challenges. I'm talking a lot at the moment about how we reimagine the game on a number of different fronts. And one thing we've realised, and probably have over the last year or so, is that the game historically has been something that has been delivered, and it's a product that we just sort of simply put out there and say, there, you either like rugby or you don't. And we're now working very hard to try and make sure that the participant or the customer, whatever that sort of language is right at the centre of the game in terms of crafting what their rugby experience is like. So around what a rugby club might look like, well, that might be much more than what it was in the old days, or much different, than old photos on the wall in a bar. It might have things like, you know, free Wi-Fi. It might have a half-court basketball court sitting to the side. It might share, you know, a range of other services with other sports, for instance, so that you build a more community shared service model. So all of those things are what we're trying to put a huge amount of emphasis in now, so that rugby is certainly a strong part of what that club might be, but it's not absolutely the centre like it used to be. And we've got to be more, you know, smarter around the way that we develop rugby experiences for people. And that goes, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but I'm passionate about it. That goes to things like having more alternative formats of the game. So, you know, less contact, ripper being played to a much older age, under 85 kilos has been fantastic this year, you know, the club competition that's been so successful around the country. So they're all ideas that are starting to bubble through now to sort of engage in some of the challenges you're talking about.
Roundy talks about this quite often, so I'll let him carry on about it. The importance of young kids. So when you go back to those, like running along the dieselled lines of a field as a kid to try and keep out of the frost, and the different sports, like you say it quite often, the importance of just having, as a kid, having that broad spectrum, because I think as soon as something gets professionalised, then you really narrow down on it. And it's kind of like, I don't think we want to be there, do we?
Oh, mate, I'm a massive believer in, you know, for my kids, you know, a team sport is a compulsory thing. Like, I just think for all the things you can learn in life, the ability to get along with other people, share a common goal, as soon as you can learn that from the youngest age possible, for all the things I'm piss poor at, there's, you know, anything that I am decent at came from, you know, being involved in team sport, and that's why I'm so keen for my kids to do it. And the one thing I noticed off the back of COVID, when we went back down for the Te Puna under-8 footy side, is just how much everyone enjoyed being back together again. And, you know, rugby was the vehicle at that particular time, but, like, we realised, shit, we really like this. We really like congregating with our friends. We really like having a natter on the sideline. We like talking and watching and supporting our kids and our own people. So I think, you know, it's the silver lining of COVID. Some of that stuff is that we realised how important that community aspect is. And to your point, Robbo, yeah, shit, we all need to have some aspirations and a pathway if that's the way we want to go. But I remember back in, you know, when I probably first started coaching, I probably was of a way that you needed a table and you needed to win, but you know, that ship has sailed. Like, I just want all the kids that I coach to have a really, really good time and come back the next season and the next season, and for them all have a direction to go, no matter what that is, because they're the ones who turn on the tally and watch the footy. They're the ones who go have a bag of chips, use the Wi-Fi, you know, get a Coke and raspberry at the rugby club. Like, it's all the community, isn't it? So we've got to try and cater for everyone and give everyone a bit of a direction.
Have you noticed that from the top looking back, is that there was almost like a push for that professionalism, and even to the level of filming First 15 rugby? Like, I was at Super 8 schools at Tauranga Boys College, and that was like, that's a pretty big deal if we got our games filmed. Do you think it's almost coming back a little bit more, like Roundy was just referring to, and just going, well, the professionalism got pushed quite far down the chain, and now it's kind of being that the tide's sort of coming back a little bit, and you're realising that kids should be there probably for more of the enjoyment, as opposed to, I guess, a Chinese Olympic model where you're like, okay, cool, you're going to be tall, so congratulations, you're a lock.
Yeah, I mean, our high performance. I'm just trying to picture that, mate. I think through me. I think you know, our high performance teams are clearly articulating where they can that rugby is a late specialisation sport. You know, we don't want to be in a position of forcing young kids to make decisions around sports or a whole lot of commitments to programs at really young ages. Play as many sports as you can, have as many experiences as you can. Would ultimately love you to play lots of rugby. That'd be great. But at the end of the day, it's important for Kiwi kids to get out and do as much as they possibly can. And then as they morph through, and grow and develop, and we all know what that can be like as you grow up and growing at different stages or not. Then you make a call on whether what you want to do in rugby. We're just as happy as if we get young people coming out of school and wanting to play at Kapong or Coastal in the areas I grew up, or go on and try and be in a high performance setting. But quite critically, we just want people playing the game. And around his point before, we have to just make sure it's fun. And success looks like turning up the next year and being part of it again. That's really critical. But I don't think we should sort of underestimate the linkage there to the longer people are in the game, the more they'll stay in contact by virtue of investing in the game. They'll buy a jersey, or they'll go to a game, or they'll buy a subscription, so there's real benefit in keeping people in the game for a long time. And then I guess the final point is there's a balancing act. Quite clearly, we need great professional teams, to help us drive revenue, and to give our countries and regions really strong aspirational pathways to be part of, and serve as, especially in times like COVID, a great reminder of what our teams can do to bring people together and really lifts the spirits and inspire at times, So there's a nice balancing act there. We're trying really hard to straddle.
You've got every jersey you can get. You've got the full gambit from regional right the way through to the All Black jersey.
Opunaki High, New Plymouth, Coastal, Canterbury, Taranaki. First game for Wellington, not for your beloved Taranaki. That's how did that come about?
Yeah, I was at Vic, so when it left Opunaki High in end of 91, and started at Vic and had a few years down there. So I got roped. Actually, David Kirk was coaching at the time, and it's when he was briefly involved with Wellington. So I think I played a handful of games. They had a great backline. I think Jason O'Halloran and Alama Edamir in the midfield. So I was sort of cleaning their boots a bit, and sitting in behind them for a while. Tana was coming through at a similar time. He was on the wing back then. So, I had a handful of games then, and then went back to Taranaki after I'd finished university and played for the Amber and Blacks then, and then ghosted between there and the UK where I was studying in Cambridge. So playing a lot of rugby back then, and doing a lot of travelling, but it was great fun.
What was the driving force behind kind of not turning you back on it because you're an AB, but chopping and wanting to get that further, I guess, education, that higher level education, and picking the UK for a place to go? Was it footy focused, or was it that just a kind of
how does that come about, an opportunity at Cambridge University? I've been to the game a couple of times in London with the Ben Dormers and the Neil Toys, supporting them, some of your alumni. But how does that come about? Because it's a very unique rugby opportunity.
Yeah, so while I was at Vic, I played a lot of rugby with a guy named Steve Cottrell, who'd played a lot of rugby in Dunedin previously. He went off there sometime in the early 90s and came back at one stage and said, hey, if anyone ever wants a fantastic experience in rugby and education and just life, this is just an unbelievable time. You should consider doing it. So sort of touched base with him, and I'd always sort of, for whatever reason, had a real hankering for wanting to have a go at going overseas to study. And one thing led to another. Applied, at that stage it was really important just to focus on the academic side of things in terms of application and that. And then once I was accepted, there was an opportunity to gain a scholarship through the rugby club, and went from there. And we had probably 7 or 8 Antipodeans there, along with guys from all over the UK and a couple of South Africans. But it was just a brilliant time. The challenge of actually studying there and learning is phenomenal. The quality of people involved is unbelievable. The history of the place, I think it's over 800 years old in parts, and some of the oldest colleges are several hundred years old. So you really walk into the place and you're just overwhelmed by the history, and it's got a record number of Nobel Prize winners and all this sort of thing, and so the rugby club itself has a beautiful quaint little English ground and really special club rooms that. I think it's got the most Lions of any rugby club in the world. Representing Cambridge back in the old days, and a huge amount of people have gone on to play international rugby too. So good level of footy, great mates that I'm still in regular touch with, and I'll be friends forever with. So yeah, really special time.
And then straight into the CEO, or after sort of, I guess, advancing in your studies, taking the role of CEO of Taranaki Rugby and bringing it back home, bringing all that knowledge back home. I mean, stepping out of the halls of Cambridge University and into the bull ring. Must have been kind of semi-worlds apart, but such a, I guess, that's what you want when you've got a regional, strong regional footy side and sort of pathway, is that they go away, get the information, bring it back. Is that with the thought process in behind coming home?
Yeah, well, I'd come back from Cambridge because I went to Cambridge relatively early compared to what a lot of guys do now. So I came back and played a bit more professional rugby, ended up in Japan, and after Japan came back to that role in Taranaki. And, it was just I guess it was a range of different things that sort of came together. I needed to find a job and needed to get back to reality because being in Japan was quite a relaxed time in terms of being a footy player. It was... there's a little bit of training, but otherwise, it was a pretty, really, really good time in terms of not having to be overly burdened with any other worries. So it was fun, but then reality hits quite hard, and I thought to myself, I could have gone back to the UK. There are opportunities to go and get involved in different careers there or in other parts of the world, but being in Japan and having our first child had really made Nova and I appreciate what New Zealand's all about and what home's all about. And we knew we wanted to come back ultimately and live as we brought a family up in a smaller regional centre for a while. So that combined with an absolute love of rugby and seeing myself starting to think I could probably work in that space. Love Taranaki, obviously it's home. Those were all the sort of things, and a real opportunity with Taranaki at that stage. Things were. They're having pretty mixed results across the board with rugby, so it was a good opportunity to go back and make a real difference too. So those are the sort of things that came together and made me take the plunge.
You was it while you were CEO of Taranaki Rugby that you became a delegate for New Zealand Rugby as well? Was that at the same time?
No, so you're not under the constitutions. Obviously, you're unable to do that. So I finished with Taranaki Rugby in, I think it was just after the World Cup in 11, so probably started 2012, and then came onto the board about a year later, started 2013. So was approached by a few different people who said, do you want to get involved there? Yeah, which at that stage, I was relatively, very young, in relation to coming onto the board. But again, it was a new challenge and something that I thought, can I help make a difference here? Loved, the game obviously still. And it was, I guess, part of a sort of next progression too. So,
what does that role involve? What's your sort of day-to-day? Obviously, the CEO of any business is to build that business, to drive that business, to make that business more profitable. Is it the same sort of role once you're on that sort of the NZR delegate to World Rugby?
You're in a governance role, so it's similar to being on the board in New Zealand Rugby. So you're very much there focused on more sort of high-level strategic matters and supporting the management team as they sort of navigate through things. So with World Rugby, I was on a few different subcommittees. So Rugby Subcommittee, Budget Advisory, I think, and EXCO, which is the main strategy board. So it involved 4 or 5 trips to mainly Dublin.
Tough.
In different parts of the year. So from lovely times in the middle, around spring, summer, through to some pretty being there in the middle of winter, which is not always great, but great hospitality, as you guys probably know, and a lot of fun and around some pretty serious moments with rugby too. So, occasionally we'd get off to other parts of the world. They felt like they had to mix things up a bit. They might take one into the Southern Hemisphere a year or off to the Middle East or somewhere, but by and large it was back to Dublin and a well-trodden few haunts we went to there. Is
it across the board? Is everyone almost on the same page? Is Northern Hemisphere rugby and Southern Hemisphere rugby pretty much in agreement on everything the way that rugby should be going, or are they is it a push-pull scenario there?
Everyone wants what's best for rugby in their own minds, I guess, and people come on.
Forever the politician.
So, I guess we go to the to those meetings and forums with a focus on, sure, we've got to look after what's best for New Zealand rugby, but ultimately we want the world game to succeed and thrive. And for it to succeed and thrive, we believe there are certain things that have to happen.
What are those things, you reckon?
We believe for the game to grow, it's got to we've got to provide more pathway opportunities for more countries and teams to be able to come and be able to perform at the highest level possible.
I think from the outside looking in, as a spectator, I think that is definitely for the first time in the last, I don't know, in my lifetime, the teams that are popping up, even teams out of China and the teams out of Russia and all those people that would sort of be fringe rugby nations, or even have it as the 15th tier sport in that country. They've got a populace and they can bring it through. America's another one that's doing incredibly well and have done so over the last decade.
Well, even Japan, I think Japan's probably a shining light really in terms in growth, isn't it? Like the domestic competition is getting a lot stronger. That obviously has some push and pull for NZ because a lot of our players go up there because they can earn some good money up there. But to see how well they played at the last 2 World Cups for that matter, but actually as hosts of the last ones, they were outstanding, and it's probably that type of growth and pathway you'd love to see for other rugby countries or Tier 2 countries around the world, I assume.
Yeah, exactly, and that's probably what we're talking to. So what has to happen for that to happen is the question of world rugby and how other leading nations can support that. So the game's got to be easily understandable. It's got to be fun to play for people in those markets to pick up. It's got to be safe. And we've got to work on a way for it to have presence and real profile in some of those areas so that it gets picked up. And then there's got to be pathway and opportunity. So we believe there's great opportunities, as you said before, guys, around some of those bigger markets to provide more opportunity for. And COVID's, I guess, dealt a real blow to the ability to do some of that stuff now and follow through some of the strategies, which I'm sure would have come after the last successful World Cup in Japan. There were a lot of plans in place ready to really drive off the back of that. But, we just have to wait for the time to come again and go hard then.
How far back has COVID put world rugby, and how far back how much of a spanner in the works has it caused for New Zealand rugby?
Well, the immediate impact was massive. I think we came out, we've been pretty open that, the initial impact on revenues could have been up to as much as 70% for this year. That's slightly improving as we've been able to stand rugby up. So massive impact to us. We'll make a loss in the order of in the tens of millions of dollars for this year, and it's had a huge impact on what our reserves will be at the end of the year. So our ability to sustain more shocks is severely compromised at the moment. Yeah. We've lost a lot of great people. It's impacted on huge number of people across not only New Zealand rugby but our stakeholder groups with provincial unions and super clubs as well. So that's been awfully tough on a lot of people involved in the game and really sad too.
Is it the equivalent of basically getting a very short high pass just off the side and having someone like maybe Smoking Joe Stanley come through and
rip your ribs apart?
Yeah, rattle the rib cage a little bit. Did it feel like that? Because obviously when we caught up, when we referred to it earlier in Hamilton, wow, what a year ahead. Off the back of the Rugby World Cup, everything was fizzing like you said. And then, here you go, short ball right up high and you just get crunched with it. Has it been tough, for yourself personally and even for your family because you've had to sacrifice so much to get the job going? How are you? And how's the family?
Mate, I'm okay, there's no doubt there were some really challenging times, and those challenges will continue at different stages. But, but it was quite weird in a way, to spend 2.5, 3 months in lockdown and not see your family, to be locked down at home, down in the Waikato there and be living out of a room similar size to this, just on Zoom from very, very early in the morning to very, very late at night, and come out briefly, normally around dinner time, quite sort of detached from your family, a lot of things going on in your mind, so that was probably I don't know if the kids buzz around and do whatever they do. I don't know if they noticed too much, but they probably felt Dad wasn't quite there, and Nova was probably the same. I just had a lot going on, but no different to what a lot of Kiwis and a whole lot of areas of business and in leadership especially were dealing with at the time. So it was just what it was at that stage. Tough, but I've come through it now and back in touch with my family a bit and feeling really good about the future of the game.
Summer's coming up. You'll be able to, like all people in the Waikato, pop over the hill and stay at the mountain.
Yeah, well, we get to Whangamatara a bit, mate, which is great. So yeah, a few less people there.
But for you, mate, like you spoke to it, like massive challenges, like cutting revenue like you've never seen before, having to, unfortunately, trim staff, let go of some great rugby people, which is hugely challenging. I can't even imagine how tough it is to have some of those conversations with people who've served in New Zealand rugby for a long period of time. But, looking around the world at the moment, as it stands right now, we've just been through the period of having 3 or 4 test matches in a row. How good with crowds. You look at the other end of the world, where it's starting to get a bit cold. I see today Irish Rugby Union bailed out by the government. You've got a normal match day at Twickenham for an All Blacks game anyway can be as much as 25 million pounds in revenue on the day, no crowds for the festival up there that they're having with the Six Nations and Georgia and Fiji. So these circumstances are the same anywhere around the world. Some would say a lot more difficult in other parts of the world. Speaking to what you're talking about before, does it actually create an opportunity for us to talk to some of those countries around the world around global calendars, around restructuring things so that, one, we're actually thinking a little bit about our expenditure and perhaps we don't need to go from Sydney to Perth to Argentina to South Africa to play rugby? Is this a great opportunity, great silver lining to restructure how we do things?
Yeah, you're right, mate. I think our initial focus has been on survival and preserving the game here in New Zealand and making sure we really lock down the future of that and start to think about what it could look like, which we might be able to talk about shortly. But you're right, it does open up, I think, firstly, a whole opportunity to think differently in the first instance and to maybe some of the things we talked about before around World Rugby and some of the views that people carry into those forums, maybe change the way we're thinking there. So there's no doubt we're going to need to work together as we look at the future in terms of what international rugby looks like, and there's no doubt that what conventionally has worked has to be reconsidered as well. So I don't have all the magic answers around that. Certainly the calendar aspect we like the opportunity that we've talked about previously is that move from July to October. We think that creates a great narrative through the year of being able to build on our club competitions in the first part of the year and then build nicely into international rugby in the second half of the year. Do some quite cool stuff with some different competition models at the back end of October, November, with teams coming north and south, or to your point, maybe in other parts of the world that we're not thinking about yet. So we're optimistic about that. It sounds at the moment that some of those opportunities might sit back, potentially after the World Cup in 2023 before we can act those changes. But optimistic, definitely. It throws up some opportunities.
And we're also lucky because I'm not 100% sure how the finances of global rugby work, but we had a cracking World Cup in 2019 that no doubt generated a lot of income for World Rugby. And we're going through these challenges at the moment in between a cycle. Fingers crossed by the time we're back playing World Cup in France, we've got things sorted. Have we dodged a bullet a little bit there, not having our major tournament affected by COVID?
Yeah, you did right there too. You've done your homework, mate.
Mate, I was driving up from the bay, listening to podcasts, mate. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. It's such a shame, as I said, that after the Japan World Cup, we haven't been able to leverage off some of the clear opportunities that provided for developing nations, and it's severely impacted on the financial resource of World Rugby, so they've had to invest in a lot of things to prop the game up, essentially. So that's been tough. But France stands as a huge opportunity. It will touch wood without too much more COVID impact, hopefully deliver not only a fantastic tournament on the field, but a lot of revenue and resource to go back into the game off the field too. So let's hope that whatever it is now, 3 odd years away, that's enough time to get through all this.
Focusing on the positives again, does this sort of interruption allow people to pump the brakes, maybe recalibrate the way that they approach the sport? Because
great COVID chat. That's great COVID chat. Say pivot. Yeah. Say pivot.
Nimble.
I think that for the longest time, since the professionalism of the sport, there's been a lot of people that almost there's an expectation, and there's an expectation of remuneration and what you get from that. And there are a lot of people with dogs in the race or irons in the fire, however you want to put it. And maybe now that whole approach can soften and people can realise how lucky they are to do this as a job, and how they are, maybe not on a global scale remunerated to the levels of Messi or, some of the big NFL players, but the guys that we've spoken to on this podcast have gone, if there's anything that I've learned from this, A, we're lucky to do what we do for a job, that we love what we do for a job. B, it's made us appreciate and stop and reflect on club footy and that first 15 rugby and all the code that we actually, and the reason why we got into this, and maybe sort of together as a collective, you can look at, I know that there were certain players at certain clubs that were relinquishing some of their pay packet to keep other staff members of the club, and I think this is all really good stuff, and it's probably cleared a lot of mess and hopefully cleared a lot of mist, and allows everyone to be able to rebuild a little bit, maybe leaner, a little bit better, a little bit more appreciative and throw everything out there, because it's probably a tough ask for you. You get 1,000,001 ideas thrown on the table because you need to pivot. You need to pivot and be agile. But then like you said, you've lost a lot of the people that are the engine and behind it, and to make that happen across the board, surely we must be in a better spot now. Although we can't see it yet.
Yeah, no, we're starting to imagine what that world looks like. I think your premise of what you're saying is right. I mean, and what we're starting to talk to people and stakeholders about in this very near phase is if everyone can give a little bit through this time, if everyone can compromise just a little bit, the whole game can gain a lot. So if we can, at different stages and levels of the game, across the board, recognise that it's tough and we're all prepared to play our part to help get through, then we can create a game that can flourish again and be really strong in our communities and where we can be and remain world leading in a whole lot of spaces. But it will take a sacrifice and a commitment to be able to do that. And that's what some of the thinking around reimagining the game comes from. We are not, and even pre-COVID, we weren't a sustainable game. Our model was unfortunately not working.
You could see that coming into the role that you were needing to steer a ship off the rocks.
Well, it was clear there were a few challenges. One, that we didn't have a financially sustainable ecosystem right across the board. People were not engaging in the game as they probably had historically, and at certain levels of the game, people not participating in the game. The way they had. Now, there are a whole lot of other issues in the game. It's just not that simple. We all acknowledge that. But those were, I guess, three key things that existed pre-COVID, and COVID has certainly accelerated the opportunity to have a really good look at those things. So that's what we're starting to do. How can we offer lower resource base at the moment, provide opportunities to look at those really challenging areas and craft a new way of doing things. All the things we talked about before around what does the game look like at community level to be able to re-engage with young people and do things differently. What do we do, in social and digital media to make sure people engage at that level of the game? People snack on content and rugby content now so much more differently than what they used to. Less people probably, especially young people, watch a full 80 to 90 minutes of a game, but they love our stats around watching shorter clips of the game are massive.
Highlights back.
So they do. 6 or 15 minutes in that, people will line up and watch that for really closely. So I guess they're symptomatics of some of the things that we're starting to think about how people engage with the game and how we can drive new ways of thinking and doing things.
Rumour has it that New Zealand Rugby is also looking at getting into buying hair salons with the number of crook lids that are out there running around on the paddocks at the moment. There's real money to be made by these young kids following people in for the mince and cheese and even the RoboCop skullet that's been run out of Weber out of the Bay of Plenty. Any substance to that rumour? I mean, we're looking at different ways to earn money.
We are looking at different revenue and alternative businesses and that. So I'll as you said, well, mate, I'll throw that on top of a very long list of ideas and advice we're getting at the moment.
Mate, though, sort of like you spoke to there, we've talked about some of the big picture stuff, but like for rugby in the near term, like where are we with Super Rugby next year? Is it going to be a domestic competition? Is it going to be the 5 teams that we know now? Is there any movement on that stuff? Where are we at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, what we're most likely looking at the moment is a Super Rugby Aotearoa, home and away. And then we're working really hard at the moment on Trans-Tasman competition after that. So before the international season starts in July, so that'll remain the same. So yeah, we're making good progress there. Certainly domestically, we're really happy with obviously what Super Rugby Aotearoa.
It was awesome.
Throughout
it was the best.
Yeah,
the best.
So there's lots of learnings from that sound real simple, in terms of what fan experience looks like, in stadia and from home. The fact we had great rugby and close competitions with uncertainty of results was gold, wasn't it? I think the fact that people probably started to understand again the opportunities to have different time slots where we played the game. So a lot of learnings there. So we've learned a lot from last year that we hope that we can build on for next year. And then into 22, I guess that's when things start to maybe open up again, and we look at, depending on a number of things being worked through with SANZAAR, what a competition would look like at club level beyond from 22 onwards.
Yeah, and it was something that was in the media a month or two ago. Do you think there will be an opportunity to bring in additional teams into Super Rugby post next season?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're certainly working very hard at. So it's been well documented that we've been working through a process to understand what different entities can bring to the table around things like people and capability, resource, player rosters, governance structures, all those sorts of different facilities, and we're working with a number of parties on that now. So really excited. That process has thrown up some good thinking, some more advice and ideas around the way we should be doing things, which is cool. We're always open to. And so we're working really hard towards sort of the end of November, hopefully having a bit more sense of what those teams could look like and then pushing on pretty quickly from there.
How do you have to split your focus and obviously you've got limited resource. Are you sort of leaning more heavily towards that top end, sort of around that All Blacks and obviously seeing what we can do with the Sevens now that there's not so much of a tournament or a circuit for them to be a part of? Or are you having to push back to that grassroots that you mentioned before, making sure that we're really fostering, because if we don't have anything coming in the bottom, we'll never have anything popping out the top. And then once again, on top of that, what is our impact globally, and where do those players fit, and how can they move around? Is that all being restructured at the moment?
Mate, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah. Maybe go focus on the top or the bottom.
Well, they're so interdependent. You're dead right, and it's a well trotted out line that without a strong base of the pyramid, we don't have a strong top of the pyramid in our professional teams. I'm off a farm, so the other analogy was the more milk you get, the more cream you get. Yeah. So you need a lot of milk to get the cream to rise to the top, and it's the same sort of model we look at in rugby. You need
how do you improve those numbers at the bottom? How do you get more milk?
Well, some of the things we talked about before. You've got to create a game that is more tailored to the participant. We've got to change the way we focus on the game offering, and talked about the different formats of the game, and but also you connect through what game day experience is like. So better coaching, better experiences when you play, different formats, different opportunities, more fun. But there's also ways that we're obviously trying to connect with people through different channels to reinforce the positivity around the game. And the fact the game offers so much, and we've all experienced this in terms of camaraderie, teamwork, the stuff you talked about at the start. Roundy, that's such a good reason to be part of the game. So that's a big part of my focus. I'm really passionate about it. I remember what my pathway was like, and a lot of my mates and millions and millions of people have had those pathways, and they're really special. So I'm really passionate about that. And then obviously you can't ignore the fact that at the top end, great competitions and great winning teams are absolutely critical to the revenue we drive. And without that revenue, you can't reinvest back in that game that we just talked about before. So it's essentially one big cycle, isn't it?
Is it exciting for you, I guess, being the boss and then just looking at the depth that we've got at that top level in both men's and women's rugby at the moment? It's just we could run out 3 teams quite happily.
Oh, mate, you never take that for granted. I am. We're really delighted with obviously the playing talent we have, and the All Blacks were great last weekend, weren't they? And showed an amazing ability to grow their game in a short amount of time. And we're really excited for the women's game about what's coming for next year with Rugby World Cup 21 being staged here, and the opportunity to, we think, showcase women's sport at a level in this country never seen before, and provide a real leadership opportunity in terms of profiling not only rugby but sport more broadly, in this country for women. So that's really exciting. You got the Olympics coming up, shortly.
We've got a date on
you guys are all chuckling, holding the line. We've. There's a lot to be excited about there, and the way those campaigns are sort of working at the moment. Obviously, there's been a bit of a pause for them, but getting into next year, there's some great opportunities there. So, those showcase opportunities with our leading players are fantastic.
Do you get out of the war room and get to Australia anytime soon? What does your travel schedule look like? Are you gonna see an Australian footy field with our players on it?
I'm mulling over it. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what it looks like. On the way back in, and
if there's
any space, yeah, that's right.
You can miss the year, but you can't miss Christmas.
yeah, that's right. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm tentatively looking at getting over. It won't be for this weekend, but maybe after that. And I'd love to get over there and obviously see the team play live. But obviously, there's lots of work to do with Rugby Australia about the future as well. So it'd be good to get amongst it over there with them too.
And we've got a couple of milestones coming up. It's good for me because I can. I'm enjoying a few moustaches that are popping up on some of our players, but we've got Mitre 10 Cup during November, which is exciting, and that's a hell of a comp at the moment. Like that is as even as it's ever been, and I'm a Cantabrian, so it hurts a little bit to see them. You clap
I'm not a Cantabrian, so I'm loving this.
You clap away, but my adopted province, the BOP, are looking good to stay up at the moment, and they've got a massive game this week as well. But we've got that; it's a great comp. We've got the Ignite Sevens, we've got the Probable Possibles Women's coming up as well. So we've got a heap of footy at this time of year that domestically, which we don't normally have. Normally the boys are up in the UK and they're playing at funny hours. So we've still got a heap of rugby this year, don't we?
Yeah, and people seem to be still, tuning in and getting to games and really enjoying it. It's too much longer and it'd be pretty hot out there for everyone, eh? But I mean, at the moment, the grounds seem to be in great nick, and people are just enjoying some genuinely great weather to get in and around the game. So, no, you're right, and that's really exciting. That tier of the game has always been a real factory in terms of producing talent, and it remains the case from what I've seen of it this year. There's some great people coming through.
We probably need to wrap things up because you are a busy man. You've given us the best part of 3 hours of your time so far. But just before we...
It flew by, mate.
Yeah, just before we sign off, is there anything that you just kind of want to get out there? Because this is the whole point of the All Blacks podcast. It is media that is owned by you, that is from the mouths of the people that matter to the fans that care. Anything that you want to say to that footy public, or even some of the doubters that have been sort of hovering around and been a pain in the ass this year?
Just thank you. Essentially, we've had amazing support, and when this all started to happen around COVID, I was just blown away by the way that people came together around our game. And you talked about it before, mate, in terms of what it meant for people to get back to their clubs and give back to their clubs again. We've had people with approaches at all, for all walks of life, with all sorts of ideas. Some wacky and crazy and some pretty cool ones, but keep them coming, team. Keep them coming. And the way that it's brought people together, and we feel the wider rugby community and fraternity and the country for that matter, it's different stages, has been huge. So it's just a big thank you. We are optimistic and really positive about the future. We know it's tough now, but we do have a plan. We have a way forward, and we're really confident that we can execute on it. It won't be straightforward, but at the same time, we're really optimistic about what the future of the game can look like in this country. So those are two messages I'll just put out there at this stage, guys.
And I guess to close, what is it that we can do as the adoring New Zealand rugby public to get round the union and our boys? What is the best thing that we can be doing?
Well, there's...
What can I say then? Just buy the jerseys. Buy jerseys. Buy 3 of them. Buy every single member of your family a jersey for Christmas.
They're a great Christmas present. Yeah, I would say that. Look, mate, just people keep engaging in the game. Keep supporting it. Keep bringing other people in who don't support it to support the game. Do whatever you can. But I mean, we're just really grateful for a whole range of things people are doing at the moment, and we'll have a little bit of a break and then get back to it in February and March and go again.
Enjoy Christmas, enjoy travel, enjoy Whangamata. And you look like you haven't been missing the sun, so you're doing well. Whatever window in that building of yours.